Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to Post Cologne. Today we're going to be taking a look at Reyane Tradition's Insurrection 2 Wild and how it compares to Mugler's Pure Havane. So let's just jump right into it. Alright, so Mugler's Pure Havane has been a darling of the fragrance community for quite a while. It's one of the more popular ones within the Mugler AMen series, and it's probably some people's favorite tobacco style fragrance because it's one of my tobacco style fragrances that I just absolutely love. But sadly, this one is discontinued and it is ridiculously hard to find. You can find it on eBay now for anywhere from $250 all the way up to $500 I saw today for a brand new inbox 100 milliliter bottle of Mugler's Pure Havane. For me, way too expensive, especially because this used to retail for $60, $70. That's what I picked this up for, was $60, $70, and there's no way I would pay $250 to $500 for this. Unless you're a hardcore fragrance collector that wants to collect all the Pokemon and have every single AMen series fragrance in your collection, which if you do, more power to you, that's awesome. Like you go get it, you go get all the AMen and you can go get it on eBay right now. You can go bid on it for like $250, $500. For me, totally not worth it, especially when there's something that'll get you in the same neighborhood and for like a fraction of the cost, and that's Reyane Tradition's Insurrection 2 Wild. Now this fragrance you can pick up at most discounters for like $25, and I'd say this puts you in the same neighborhood as Mugler's Pure Havane. Both of these fragrances are absolutely gorgeous tobacco style fragrances, and they are very, very similar, but there are some variations between the two. This is not a 100% clone of Mugler's Pure Havane, but it gets you pretty close. So I'm gonna cover everything from the opening all the way to the dry down and the performance, and we're just gonna jump into it right now. So with the opening, what you get on both of these fragrances is a very like honey tobacco, cherry, vanilla style vibe. One of the main differences is they both have cacao in this, but the cacao comes out a lot more in the Pure Havane, whereas this one has like a touch of spice that's missing from the Pure Havane, and this one comes a lot more syrupy sweet with a more pronounced kind of cherry vibe going on with that honeyed tobacco. You still get that honey tobacco cherry vibe with Pure Havane, but it's a lot more subdued and you get a little bit more of that cacao, and this has like a little bit more of a body to it, whereas this one has more of kind of a syrupy sweetness to it. Very, very similar openings. I'll tell you, they both have that beautiful honey tobacco cherry vibe going on, but there are slight differences. A little bit spicier and sweeter. This one a little bit more cacao and a little bit more kind of earthy body going on to it. Now as these work their way through the mid, they do start to kind of get a little bit more similar, but they are still separate in some small kind of ways. This one has a patchouli note that's in it, whereas this one does not. And that's where you really start to kind of see this kind of deviate a little bit more, because this becomes a little bit more earthy. The tobacco gets elevated, it gets a lot more body to it. And so you get a lot more kind of a richer tobacco that starts happening with this, along with that cacao and again, that honeyed cherry tobacco kind of vibe going on with this. This one gets a lot more body to it, a lot more earthier with that patchouli coming through and just adding that kind of oomph to the tobacco. Whereas when this one starts to dry down, it still maintains that sweetness, it's still got that syrupiness to it, and it's still got that honey tobacco, but it's not as kind of that rich tobacco as with Pure Havane. Again, very, very similar. The deviations between these two are minor, but they are noticeable to my nose. I can pick out the subtle differences to this. So as this dries down, a little bit more earthy, this one a little bit more sweet and syrupy. Now in terms of performance, I conducted a super scientific experiment where I just sprayed a bit on each hand, and then I didn't wash my hands for the rest of the day. I know that sounds horrible, but I didn't, because we were conducting a science experiment, and this is what we do for science. This is what I do for you, my viewers, at Post Cologne, is we do science and I don't wash my hands for the whole day so I can test longevity of two different fragrances. And my findings were that these kind of performed about the same. It was about 7, maybe 8 hours if I really got my nose up to my hand about the 8-hour mark, but 7 hours, so I could still smell these on my hand. Off my skin, I had a very similar kind of dry down as I did with test strips. It was the earthiness in this, the patchouli was coming out a lot more. It had more of a kind of a body tobacco with that honeyed cherry kind of vibe going on, but not as sweet. The sweetness of this was a lot more subdued, but you still get that cherry tobacco vibe going on, but the patchouli was really singing with this one. Whereas this one still maintained that sweetness, that syrupiness, along with that honey tobacco vibe. Very, very similar dry downs, but this one was a little bit sweeter, and this one projected a little bit better because of that sweetness that's in there. I found kind of the patchouli earthiness of this kind of made it sit a little bit closer to the skin, so this wasn't pushing off nearly as much. This one was, because of that sweetness, because that cherry was just popping off a little bit more, and because it had that kind of syrupy vibe going to it, I did find that this pushed off a little bit more. But in terms of longevity, they were about the same, around the 7-hour mark, but this one slightly edged it out in terms of projection. Both beautiful fragrances on the dry down, and kind of hard to tell apart but because I'm a scientist, I was able to distinguish between the two. So my overall thoughts on Reyane Tradition's Insurrection 2 Wild is I think it's a fantastic fragrance, and it's definitely going to get you in the neighborhood of Mugler's Pure Havane. I'd say about 90% of the way. Like I said, small, very small sort of differences. This is a little bit more syrupy sweet, but I think it's just a banger of a fragrance. The quality of the juice in here for a $25 fragrance is above and beyond. It definitely does not smell like a $25 fragrance, which surprised me. I kind of expected this to be a little bit more synthetic, a little bit perhaps screechy, maybe get me halfway to Mugler's Pure Havane, but not all the way. But it really blew my socks off. This is a great fragrance. For that price point, it's fantastic. The quality of the juice in here is just great. Performance on this is fantastic. And if you want that honey tobacco cherry sort of vibe going on, you're gonna love this one. So I definitely think you should get your nose on it. That's Reyane Tradition's Insurrection 2 Wild. And let me hear from you guys. What are some of your favorite clones that you have in your collection? Like, what is something, if you were blindfold tested, you'd have a tough time telling the two apart? Like, let me know down in the comments. Go click on the comment box right now. What are some of your favorite clones that you have in your collection? What's something I should be checking out? Go do that. Go type in the comment section right now. And if you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you all next time.